here's Ed Bernstein.
There's a rerun. Hi. Hey, you caught me talking to my guest, Shelley Berkley.
Oh, my goodness.
Hi,
Hello,
Shelley.
Ed.
Former Congresswoman, now head of Touro University,
Yes.
Senior Provost and CEO over at Touro University. And we'll talk about what that job is in a moment, but we can't help but talk about politics
Can't help
now,
it.
right?
Can't help
you
it.
You can't go anywhere. I mean, you can't put on any
huge.
news channel.
Yeah, yeah.
And let me ask you about the news coverage over the last election. What is your overall feeling about it?
Well, I think I should first say, if it's a surprise to any of your viewers, I was a big Hillary person. I supported her in 2008 when I was in Congress and continued my support of her in this election as well, and was very surprised that she lost. Look, the man is a phenomenon. Our president-elect, Donald Trump, is a media phenomenon, whatever it was. He captured the imagination of the American people, and more to the point of your question, the media, for good or ill, was enamored with this man. No matter what he said, they covered. No matter what he did, they covered. Whether it was biased or not, I don't know. But I do know that it was probably disproportionate with, I don't think there was equal time there. Whether that would have made a difference in the election, I'm not suggesting that it was, but I think he was intriguing and exciting to cover. I mean, every time he said something preposterous that nobody had ever heard in politics, it was covered.
Yeah, it seemed to me that as the primary went on, it seemed like the media was kind of like, not really critical of him. And then,
I think that's correct. Who would have ever imagined?
Right.
I mean, during the primary, look who he vanquished. And that should have been, I guess, an indication what would portend in the general election. But there were senators, there were governors, there were longtime politicians and public servants, and he vanquished them all.
But then when the general election occurred, it seemed that the media then, got a little bit more critical, and each critical news story, as they evolved, seemed to really not change voters' minds.
No. As I said, he captured the imagination of a segment of our population, and not an insignificant segment of our population. And what he said, I'm going to use his own words, he could shoot somebody in downtown any place, New York, and still wouldn't lose a single vote.
Yeah. You're a long-time Democrat. I mean, you know that party, especially in Nevada, probably is good, if not better, than anybody. In Nevada, the election results were a lot different.
Yes, they
than
were.
Where they were around the rest of the country, particularly if you were a Democrat. There were two Republican seats that were turned.
Flipped over, yeah.
They flipped over, right? And in the state assembly and the state senate
went Democratic.
Were flipped. The county commission were all Democrats. Why the difference?
Now, that's a very, very good question. One, I think we should never discount the Harry Reid factor. This election was important to him. It was his last hurrah, and I think he was all in on this election with the state party, and it has helped for 20 years, and it helped in this election to have Harry Reid. Another thing is they worked it so well. The woman that was running the Hillary campaign was a former staff member of mine, Asha Jones, and she had a depth and wealth of experience in the political arena, and I think she ran a very good Hillary campaign. Hillary ran strong. Consequently, it pulled a lot of Democrats along with her. And this is a very partisan era in American politics. So if you're hitting the lever in the top of the ticket, I think that gave Catherine an advantage. And again, it wasn't a huge win, but it doesn't matter. It was a good win.
It was,
a
compared
win.
to everywhere else in the
Yes.
country, it was a huge win.
It was a huge win. And the others, I mean, I know Jackie Rosen very well. I think she's going to make a wonderful Congresswoman, very conscientious, hardworking, heart in the right place. She ran a wonderful campaign, and she was a first-timer. And she just took to this like a duck in water. And as much as I love Danny Tarkanian as a friend, I think she ran a good campaign. Rubin, it's the district. And Rubin's, let's say, time had come. And again, I had a very good relationship with Crescent Hardy, but I think that Rubin was destined to win this one. And of course, Dina is in a wonderful congressional district for a Democrat, but the woman works like a dog. And she works very hard, and she very accurately and more than adequately reflects the needs and the people of her district. So this was a great thing. And then it just, you keep hitting those levers, and you get to the state Senate, and you get to the Assembly, just natural.
Of course, Harry Reid was so engaged because Catherine Cortez Masto was running for Harry's seat, and he was determined to keep a Democrat.
He handpicked her and wanted very much, it meant a lot to him, I believe, that his seat didn't flip over. I think he would have felt that he was letting people down by having that happen. So as I said earlier, he was all in and did whatever he could to get Catherine over the finish line.
Let's talk about some of the races that you just mentioned, and you talked about Danny Tarkanian. Were you surprised in the primary when he came out of the primary and beat Robeson?
Yes, I really was. I mean, Robeson, a lot of Democrats didn't step up to the plate after having been, asked to run and cajoled to run, but they took a pass because they didn't think they could beat Michael Robeson. He was the man to beat, and it wasn't even to beat. Everyone thought it was a no-brainer that he was going to win that primary. And so I think it took a lot of people out on the Democratic side, and Danny had a solid victory in that election.
Because there was a very contested primary. Did that hurt, you think, Danny Tarkanian? Are these contested primaries really hurt somebody in general? Sometimes they can help, I think.
God bless Danny, but he is, I think his politics are pretty far to the right, and I think they were far to the right of that congressional district. That used to be part of mine. When I started back in 1998, there were only 2 congressional seats in the state, so I had all of Southern Nevada. So that 3rd congressional district I know very well because I represented it. I think Danny was much further to the right. Even in a Trump election, he was further to the right. And consequently, Jackie just, got from the left to the middle, and she won the election.
Let's talk about 1998, okay? You got elected to Congress.
Yes.
The same, I mean, you're a new Congressperson coming in, the same way that Jackie Rosen and Rubin will be next month, right?
Yes.
So what kind of training? What do you have to do? You have to get an apartment. I mean, what is the process?
Well, first of all, you're exhausted from the election. No matter how you ran and how much you won by, you're dead by the time it's done, emotionally, physically, every way. And then a week later, before you have any time to recover, because particularly, and I hate to sound sexist, if you're a woman, you haven't done laundry in a month, so the laundry's piled up. So that week, I mean, when you wake up and you won or lost, but let's say you won, you've got a million things to do that last month of the election you just put aside because you had to win this election. And so there's a lot of getting back to normal. And then you're in Washington for freshman orientation. And I can tell you without fear of contradiction that when I walked in, you pick your office and then the drapes.
And how do you pick your office?
Well, there's a lottery. And, you know, people move up with seniority. And so, yeah, the freshmen get the dregs of whatever's left.
Right.
And so you get a freshman office. It's usually in the Longworth building, pretty small, but you've got an office. I remember walking, and then you also pick the colored drapes. It's not much choice. It's either red or blue.
Oh, really? Do you get a budget to go, or you have
it's pretty standard stuff, you know, that comes with winning the office. And so, and the furniture, you inherit your predecessor's furniture in the office, and it's in very bad shape, so you try to get better furniture and on and on. But I remember walking in to my congressional office after I'd picked the lottery and picked out the drapes and the carpet, and I looked at it, I said, I can't believe I fooled all those people back home that they actually think I could do this job.
Right.
And the first term that you're there, through freshman orientation, I've got a great story to tell you about Bill Clinton, and then you come home and you've got to go back, you got to get an apartment, you're you know, within a month you are, for all intents and purposes, moving to Washington, D.C., where chances are you don't know anybody, and you've seldom been, other than on vacation with the family when the kids were growing up. So it's a big step, and all of it, I mean, it's just, you're in a fog the entire
overwhelming.
time.
But how do you learn to be a congressperson?
Well,
and you do the orientation. You learn anything at the orientation?
Sure you do. I mean, it's when they say it takes a year to find out where the bathrooms are, it really does. It really does. So yeah, they give you valuable information, and you're learning a lot, and you're meeting a lot of people, and you're getting committee assignments and this and that. But one of the highlights was a trip to the White House. And I'm sure it doesn't matter which president, and it's both the Republicans and Democrats, it's the freshman class.
Right.
And when I went, so this was probably end of November, 98. And so you go to the White House. Bill Clinton opens the door, and he was president at the time, welcomed us. There were about 40 freshmen that year. You come in, he knew everybody by name, and he said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said, oh, that was a real cliffhanger. He says, I was on the phone with Brian Greenspun that night just to make sure you were okay. And you think, oh my gosh, the president of the United States cared that much about me. Then, and because this was Bill Clinton, he proceeded to give us a tour of the, family residence, and to the point, and
so he
the
just
Oval
marches
Office,
the 40 of you around the White House.
Explained every cup hold, everything on his desk, on every other desk, into minute detail. Now, at that time, I flew in sick as a dog. I got sick, right? I kind of willed myself to stay healthy until the election was over, and then I got sick as a dog, but you had to go to freshman orientation. And so I'm sitting, after like the second hour of walking around and having him talk and showing us everything, I looked at the Secret Service. And I said, excuse me, I said, how long will this go on? I wanted to go back to the hotel, get some rest. And he said, oh, he's going to be talking for hours. I said, oh my gosh. And he was, and he did, and it was an extraordinary experience, but loved it.
So with Ruben and Jackie as part of that freshman class, would they go and meet with Obama, or would they wait until after the inauguration?
Obama's there now. I'm sure that he invited all the freshmen to the White House. And there's a host of receptions at the Library of Congress, which is still my favorite building on the planet. And so you're welcomed very nicely. Now, let me say this. Once you're sworn in, all of that goes away. But for that week that you're at freshman orientation, it's a very special welcome.
So, now you're sworn in.
You're sworn in.
Next day, you probably have a vote to cast. How do you
Yes,
prepare for that?
Because if you were smart, and this is another thing, putting together your staff. The people that are applying are the youngsters, and I'm talking, they just graduated Harvard, Stanford, Yale, UNLV. I mean, they graduated great schools, and they're willing to work for dirt, and they're willing to work very, very long hours, because as a staffer, that's what you do. And so hopefully you've compiled a good team, and usually your legislative director is pretty knowledgeable. You're not going to hire a kid out.
You hire somebody that's probably familiar,
for a while.
lives in Washington already.
Yes, has been, on the Hill for a while, and worked their way up from legislative aide to legislative director.
So what do? They present, hey, this is what you're voting on tomorrow, Shelley. This is the positive side, this is the negative side, and they present both arguments to you?
No. Not at all. There's only one argument, and usually, especially with the organizational stuff, because at that time, remember, one of your first votes is casting who's going to be speaker, and so all the D's are going to vote for Nancy Pelosi, all the R's are going to vote for Paul Ryan. There's not going to be any defections on either side, or if there are, very, very few. So the procedural stuff, you're going to stick with your party. It isn't until you're there for a little while that you start doing the substantive issues. Now, I didn't, again, that first, my youngest, Sam, was bar mitzvahed right after the election. So at the end of November, you were there. Sam was bar mitzvahed. I moved to Washington and got sworn in at the beginning of January. I got married to Larry at the end of March. And so that whole year was a blur. And they were very concerned that in February that I wasn't raising money for my reelection. I still had a debt from the last election.
This is a month after you're in office and you're fundraising again.
Call all the freshmen together, and how are you doing with your fundraising? I looked at them like they were out of their minds. I got a wedding I'm planning for next month. Oh, no, you're way late now, way late. I'm thinking, what in the heck? And so I got through my wedding, and when we got back from the honeymoon, I started gearing up for running for re-election. I didn't feel much like a congresswoman, and I did come home, as you know, every weekend for 14 years. At the beginning, it was very tough, very tough. But then it was after I got reelected and I walked back into my office, my staff was humming along. There were a bunch of issues that they wanted to talk to me about. And, oh, yeah, we'll do this. No, I'm not going to do that. And that's when I sat down and I looked around and I said, I'm a congresswoman. Wow. But it takes a couple of years.
You mentioned Nancy Pelosi. She once again got elected by the Democrats to be their leader. There was, some challenge, I guess, but there was a lot of people that were publicly saying, hey, it's time for a change. What was your feeling about that?
I thought it was time for a change. Look, the woman is extraordinary. There's no doubt about it. But I think it's time for an infusion of younger blood into the party, and perhaps a different face. And so I think it would have been an appropriate thing for her to step down and be a senior statesman. But apparently she still feels she's got some good fight in her, and apparently her caucus agrees. And this is this is an election, and it's secret ballot, so you could vote for who you want. If the caucus chose to keep her there, there's a reason for it. And again, she's tough as nails. It's going to be a very interesting and probably bumpy time for the Democrats over the next few years. And apparently the conventional wisdom was we want an experienced politician in this position.
So, 3 months ago, if you would have asked what is the status right now of the Democratic Party, they were humming, right? Hey, we're going to win the Senate back. We're going to make big inroads in the House. We're going to win the presidency. Now the talk is, hey, what's wrong with this party? It's in disarray. What is their message? They have no leadership. There's no bench. There's no rookies.
I wouldn't say that, because you never know who's going to rise to the top. And I remember years ago, I've been doing this a long time, when Bill Clinton first started making the rounds. Governor from Arkansas, are you kidding me? not so much. He had a pretty illustrious career. So you never know who's in the background. Who would have thought Mike Pence would be the Vice President of the United States? Right. And interestingly enough, I like Mike. Obviously, we would vote on, the only thing that we had in common was the way we were voting on Israel. And we did a lot of supporting legislation together. He on the Republican side, me on the Democratic side. But if you would have told me a few years ago that Mike Pence would be the Vice President of the United States, wasn't going to happen.
Okay, so who do you like that's new? I'll tell you who I like.
Who do you like?
Because when Catherine Cortez Masto was running, one of the people who came in to support her was, what's his name, Booker.
Cory.
Yeah, Cory Booker.
You know,
from
his
New
mother
Jersey.
lives here.
His mother lives in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And this man was
Eloquent,
such eloquent,
magnificent,
intelligent, charismatic.
Yes, all of those
I heard
things.
him speak at the Democratic convention. I thought he did a decent job with that. I think he's he's got
I think
potential.
he's a comer. I'm
Yeah.
not even sure he hasn't come already, but he's definitely got a great future in the party and in the country. I think he's rational, reasonable, and highly intelligent.
Who do you like?
You
Anybody
know,
else?
I haven't even given it a thought. I'm just hopeful that the Democrats will be a little introspective. And look, we have, I think it's a number of things, but it's also the messaging. And we do a terrible job of messaging. And people vote against their own self-interest. And I'll give you a perfect example, and perhaps people will disagree with me, but the Democrats have been solidly for Social Security and protecting Social Security and Medicare. Republicans would like to privatize it, and I think you're going to hear a lot about that in the next few years, and they might be able to get that done. Seniors overwhelmingly in this country supported the Republicans. Now, to me, that is voting against your own self-interest. Mm-hmm. They all want to save their Social Security. They all want to protect their Medicare, yet they vote for the party that wants to privatize
well, maybe they don't think they'll really do it. I wanted to ask you also about Hillary's choice, Tim Kaine. You talk about messaging because, I've never met the man, but he seems like a really nice guy. I mean, he was bilingual.
Did he add anything to the ticket?
And there was no, he didn't, yeah, what did he bring and why didn't he go out and, work that Latin market?
I have to tell you, I think that everybody, including myself, and I suspect including Hillary, completely underestimated and missed the boat with Donald Trump. And I know I get into discussions all the time with Democrats that she won the popular vote and this and that. The fact of the matter is he's getting sworn in January. Yeah. You could say anything you like, he won. Having said that, I don't think they fully appreciated the impact of a Trump election. Consequently, she was looking beyond the election and thinking, who can I best govern with? Who would be the best partner for me? Right. And who would be the best vice president? I think she said that, And that's exactly what happened. She chose him for governing. Right. She didn't choose him for running. And somebody once told me years ago, I ran for the state Senate. This is, oh my God, more years ago than I care to remember. And I lost by a little bit. And I still had lots of money in the bank. And people were saying, why didn't you put out that last minute mailing? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? I said, because I thought I was going to win and I was saving it for keeping in contact. Yeah. And they said, you're not an elected official until the last vote is counted. You're a candidate until then, and that's why that money is there. Somebody, it's not your bank account; it's your campaign account, and it's supposed to be spent.
Let's running out of time. You knew this was going to happen. You didn't have a chance to talk
30 seconds.
No, we have a few minutes about Touro University. What is Touro University?
Touro University is a private, non-profit, Jewish-sponsored institution of higher learning. We do all postgraduate professional schools. We have the largest medical school in the state of Nevada. We admit and graduate 135 future doctors future doctors.
Right.
Now, let me say this. For the 135 slots, we had 3,700 applications this year. We can afford to be extremely choosy of who we select. And if we select you for admission, we expect you to graduate because you've got the right stuff. We've got our occupational therapy program, a doctorate, our physical therapy doctorate, physician assistants, arguably the hottest job in healthcare right now. We've got the only physician assistant program in the entire state. We admit 60 students a year. I had 1,100 applications. It is a tough school to get into. We also have a nursing program, and we are getting accreditation for a nurse practitioner program. Why? Because the state, in its infinite wisdom, said that nurse practitioners don't have to be supervised by a doctor, and they could write prescriptions. I think that's the next big thing in healthcare.
And you have campuses in Las Vegas, isn't there? There's one in
There are
California.
29 campuses in the Touro system. I'm running the 2 on the West Coast, here and in Vallejo, California. But Nevada, this is a honey of a university, and we are helping to educate the next generation of healthcare providers for the state of Nevada.
Now, UNLV is going to have a medical school this semester or next semester?
Next year.
Next year. So how does that work with Touro? And is that
I tell Barbara,
a friendly competition?
I think it's a collaboration and a competition. The fact of the matter is, I got 3,700 applications. I'll gladly give Barbara half, and I'll still have an extraordinary amount to choose from. So look, we have a tremendous doctor shortage. You could have 1, 2, or 10 new medical schools without graduate medical education, residencies. We are educating a whole lot of future doctors to go practice elsewhere.
Well, how do we get them to stay in Nevada?
We need to create residency programs here.
And is that with the hospitals to do that?
Yes, and we have most of our residencies with Valley Hospital, but and let me give you a number here, 70% of doctors end up practicing where they do their residencies.
Not where they went to medical school.
No, where they do their residencies. If we've got 90 residency programs with Valley, but it's 30, 30, 30 because it's 3 years long. Then you can't practice medicine when you get out of medical school. You've got 3 more years of residency to do. If I'm graduating 135 future doctors every year and only 30 of them can stay in town to do residencies, we are losing 105 future doctors, and statistically 70% of them are not coming back.
So do we need the hospitals to be a little bit more assertive? We have about 30 seconds left now.
Okay. Last year, last legislative session, the governor allocated and the legislature voted $10 million to help start residency programs. They're very expensive to start. This year, I understand that the governor is going to do the same, maybe a little bit more. And the more money we have to start residency programs, the more residencies we will create, and that's where you get your doctors, not medical schools.
Right, okay. So, all right, we need the governor, we need the legislators, and the hospitals to get on board and get these
residencies. And the 3 medical schools to work together, like we did last legislative session.
And then maybe we can have enough doctors. You won't have to wait 3 months for an appointment to go see somebody, right? You have to wait 3 months to see my husband, absolutely. Yeah. And don't forget my autism center, our mobile clinics. We go to Shade Tree, we go to U.S. Vets, take care of the homeless veterans. We have a partnership with Metropolitan Police, take care of the people that are truly homeless and living on the streets. And we have a brand new partnership with Opportunity Village. My students... Thank you, Ed. Thank you. Shelley Berkley. Hey, check out Touro University, tu.edu.
All right.
See you next week.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you've been hurt in an accident, turn to someone you can trust. Enough said. Call Ed.
I'm Ed Bernstein, and I've been helping you and your neighbors for almost 40 years.